Mrs. Cross, your left hand. It's shaking. That's not stress. Harold's voice cut through Silvercore's strategy meeting, low and steady. The room froze. Evelyn Cross, the company's formidable CEO, turned her head, her steel-gray eyes locked onto the black janitor. Beside her, Marcus Lee, her ambitious chief of staff, smirked. He leaned back in his chair, the smirk curling at the corners of his mouth as if he were in on a private joke no one else could hear. "Excuse me?" Evelyn's tone was pure ice. "The tremor isn't from stress," Harold repeated, his voice calm. "You need to—" "Stick to cleaning floors, Mason," she cut him off. "I run this company, not you." For a moment, Harold stood there, his face unreadable. There was no defiance, no shame, only a quiet stillness that seemed to make the silence even heavier. Then, without another word, he stepped forward to pick up a sheet of paper that had slipped from the edge of the table. As he bent down, a sliver of metal glinted from the pen clipped to his shirt pocket. Captain H. Mason, M.D. No one noticed, or perhaps no one cared. Except for Marcus, whose eyes lingered for a fraction of a second on the glint of metal before looking away. He placed the paper neatly on the table in front of Evelyn, then walked out in silence, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. A warning was given. A choice was made. And from this moment on, every tick of the clock is a countdown. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, consider joining us for the journey ahead. We have a feeling you won't want to miss what Harold sees next. Evelyn Cross descended the grand staircase, the heels of her shoes striking a rapid staccato rhythm against the marble. She glanced at her phone, muttering something in frustration. For a split second, her left foot missed its step, her body lurching in a brief, uncontrolled moment. She caught herself on the railing, but her left hand, the same hand that had trembled in the boardroom, jerked again, an undeniable spasm. It was gone in an instant, swallowed by her iron composure. But Harold, mopping the floor at the base of the stairs, had seen it. That tremor was an echo, a ghost of a memory that hit him with the force of a shockwave, erasing the cool, sterile lobby. The smell of floor polish vanished, replaced by the acrid sting of gunpowder and the shriek of metal. Afghanistan. He was crouched beside a young soldier, blood pooling beneath his head, dark against the sand. The soldier's left arm twitched, a subtle but deadly tremor. Harold's hands were already there, a blur of precision and urgency, finding a pulse, clearing an airway. "Intracranial pressures rising," he had yelled over the roar of combat. He had saved the kid, pulling him back from the edge. The memory vanished as quickly as it came, shattered by a heavy thud in the present. Near the security desk, Peter Ortiz, one of the guards, had collapsed to the floor. A startled gasp came from a nearby assistant. The other guard just stood there, frozen in shock. But Harold was already moving. Instinct over thought. He swept past the stunned faces, a blur of practiced efficiency. The mop was forgotten, clattering against a wall. "Get him on his side." His voice cut through the air, no longer the quiet janitor's. It was deeper, sharper, coated with the unmistakable authority of command. "Call paramedics, now." His hands moved with breathtaking competence, loosening Peter's tie, a deft finger checking his pupils, the other hand stabilizing his head to protect his spine. "You know what you're doing." The voice sliced through the chaos, not a question, but a statement. Harold looked up. An older man in an expensive suit was standing there. Lionel Hughes. His eyes were sharp, and they weren't on Peter. They were locked on Harold's hands. "You were a doctor," Lionel stated flatly. Harold didn't answer, his focus entirely on the unconscious man on the floor. But Lionel stepped closer, his gaze finally settling on the pen clipped to Harold's shirt pocket, where the overhead lights caught the faint engraving. "Captain H. Mason, M.D., Lionel read aloud, his voice clear enough to silence the murmurs around them. "You can't hide that." At this, Harold's gaze finally broke from Peter and met Lionel's, a look that was sharp and guarded. That was another life. Was it? Lionel raised an eyebrow, his tone challenging. Skill doesn't stay in another life, Mason. It saves them. The only question is, are you going to let it? Harold said nothing. His tense silence was an answer in itself. He turned back to Peter just as the paramedics rushed in with a gurney and medical bags. As they took over, Harold stepped back, melting into the crowd, his commanding presence vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. As they wheeled Peter away, Lionel remained. He didn't smile. He just gave a single, decisive nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, as if he had just confirmed the existence of a rare and valuable element. Harold retrieved his mop, feeling the weight of Lionel's stare, the weight of a past he had tried to bury, now screaming to be heard. The quiet anonymity he had spent years building had just been shattered by a single sentence. And Harold had a sinking feeling that the silence wouldn't be returning any time soon. But the battles at Silvercore weren't the only ones Harold had to fight. When he got home, another kind of pressure was waiting for him. "Dad, you're wasting your money," Jordan muttered, dropping his backpack onto the kitchen floor. "Med school's a luxury we can't afford." Harold didn't look up from the sink where he was scrubbing out the remnants of dinner. The faucet hissed softly, the only other sound in their small apartment. Jordan stood behind him, arms crossed. "I just got off the phone with financial aid. They're cutting back. Again." Still no reaction. Just the sound of the sponge moving in slow circles. "I'll take a year off," Jordan continued. "Work, help out. You're killing yourself at that job, and for what? You think being a janitor is going to cover tuition and rent?" Finally, Harold turned, drying his hands with a faded dish towel. He studied his son for a long moment, not judging, just weighing. "You know what a man's worth is?" Harold asked. Jordan shifted his weight, eyes narrowing. "Money, degrees, power." Harold shook his head once. "A man's worth isn't in his title, son. It's in how he carries himself when no one's watching." Jordan let out a short laugh. "That's easy to say when you're stuck scrubbing floors." Harold didn't respond. He just walked past, grabbing his coat. "Where are you going?" Jordan asked. "Work." The door closed behind him before Jordan could say anything more. Back inside Silvercore Tower, the 39th floor buzzed with activity. Assistants typed furiously. Phones rang, doors opened and shut with executive precision. Inside the main boardroom, Evelyn Cross stood at the head of the table, delivering a rapid-fire update to her senior team. Her tone was clipped, eyes sharper than usual. Marcus Lee sat 2 seats to her right, flipping through his tablet, his stylus moving across the screen. But he wasn't taking notes on revenue or strategy. He was tracking something else: subtle behaviors, inconsistencies, tremors, pauses, word confusion, moments that didn't belong to the Evelyn Cross they all knew. He tapped twice on his tablet and minimized the window just as she glanced his way. Evelyn gestured to a chart on the screen behind her. "If we move the rollout ahead of schedule, we can outpace Novartech by Q2. Clara, run the numbers on manufacturing. Marcus, coordinate with our legal team in Brussels." Marcus nodded, eyes calm, smile smooth. "Of course." Harold stood just outside the glass, invisible in plain sight as usual. He pretended to mop a corner near the reception area, but his eyes, sharp, clinical, were fixed on Evelyn. Her hand gripped the edge of the table a beat too long. She blinked 5 times in 6 seconds. Rapid. Strained. He'd seen that blink pattern before. Not in boardrooms, but in trauma units. On evacuation choppers, in the back of Humvees under siege. Harold stepped away from the glass and walked toward the utility closet at the end of the hall. Once inside, he pulled a small worn notebook from the inside pocket of his jacket. He flipped to a fresh page, its corners softened by time. Observation Log, EC. Unsteady gait descending stairs, 08:23 a.m., left hand tremor, Boardroom, 0902 a.m. Blink pattern, 5 in 6 seconds. Possible visual disorientation, 9:07 a.m. Verbal repetition, slight, unclear if noticed by others. He wrote in sharp, methodical print, military clean. As he closed the notebook, a shadow moved past the closet window. Marcus, alone, glancing briefly over his shoulder before slipping into Evelyn's empty office. Harold narrowed his eyes. Back in the hallway, he returned to his cart and continued his routine, but now, each pass of the mop was calculated, measured. The war zone had changed. The uniforms were different. But the signs of something going wrong, those always looked the same. And Harold Mason had never been one to ignore symptoms, whether they showed up on the battlefield or behind boardroom glass. The following morning, Silvercore's executive conference room was packed wall to wall. Quarterly earnings, international expansion, patent filings. Evelyn Cross stood like a general at the helm of a warship, pacing slowly in front of a massive display screen, her voice cool and commanding. But Harold, stationed near the back with a cart of water bottles and coffee refills, wasn't looking at the charts. He was watching Evelyn. Q2 projections look solid, she said, gesturing to a graph. But we'll need tighter oversight from department heads, especially… Marcus, what's the latest from marketing? Marcus stood, tablet in hand. We're ahead of schedule. Erica's team in Sao Paulo has delivered early. Evelyn nodded slowly, then turned to a man seated near the end of the table. Good work, Jonathan. Your leadership's paying off. The room went quiet. Marcus blinked. The man she'd addressed, Gregory Hunt, head of legal, looked up, confused. Evelyn continued without missing a beat, but the air in the room shifted. Subtly, uncomfortably. Only a few noticed. Harold did. So did Marcus, who masked his reaction with a quick cough and a note scribbled onto his tablet. But Harold wasn't done watching. Evelyn paused during the next slide, squinting for a moment before catching herself. Her hand clenched and unclenched at her side. The slide flickered. She shook her head once, then continued. Harold excused himself from the room shortly after, pushing his cart out with smooth efficiency. Downstairs, in the break room no one ever used, he opened his notebook. Observation. Log, EC, mistaken identity. Referred to Gregory Hunt as Jonathan. Visual confusion, hesitated at slide number 4, minor hand clenching, possible tremor recurrence, continued verbal fluency, but small error pattern emerging. He clicked his pen shut and exhaled, staring at the page. Something was happening, and not just once or twice, a pattern. Still he hesitated. He wasn't a doctor anymore, at least not on paper. Who would listen? More importantly, who could act? He flipped back 2 pages, scanning his prior notes. His instincts screamed not to ignore it, but instincts weren't credentials, not in this place. That afternoon, he waited until the end of day to approach the executive floor again. He knew Evelyn would be gone. Her driver always picked her up at exactly 5:35 p.m. But Clara Donovan, the CFO, often stayed late. He found her office door cracked open. Clara sat inside, glasses perched. On her nose, crunching numbers on dual monitors. Harold knocked once. She glanced up. Mr. Mason, everything all right? Harold hesitated in the doorway. I have something. It's probably nothing. But it might be something. Clara gestured him in, surprised but not unkind. He placed the notebook on her desk. I've noticed some changes. With Mrs. Cross. Not just stress. There are signs, symptoms. Clara opened the notebook, flipping through the pages. The handwriting was clinical, precise. A log, time-stamped, objective. She didn't speak for nearly a minute. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. You documented all of this? Harold nodded once. 15 years. Military medical. I've seen these signs before. This isn't just burnout. Clara nodded slowly. I'll have Dr. Lang, corporate medical, take a look. Harold tensed. With respect, he's a dermatologist. This isn't a skin rash. Clara cracked the smallest of smiles. Fair point. Then her expression shifted again, more serious. Thank you for bringing this to me. I'll handle it from here. Harold gave a slight nod and exited. What he didn't see was Marcus standing halfway down the hall, watching through the reflection in the glass. Later that night, while Clara stepped away from her office to take a call, Marcus slipped inside. He scrolled through the document Harold had left on her desk. Quickly, carefully, then transferred a copy to his own drive before slipping out unnoticed. The next morning, Evelyn burst into her office, fuming. "Who told Clara I'm losing my mind?" she snapped. Her voice echoed down the hallway. Marcus was already seated at the edge of her desk, calm, rehearsed. "I didn't say anything specific," he said. "She asked about your health after the meeting. I mentioned, maybe you've been under pressure, that's all." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Then how the hell does she have a report on my symptoms? Who's behind this?" Marcus feigned confusion. Maybe someone on staff, someone trying to stir up drama. She paced in tight circles, eyes blazing. "I built this company. I carried it on my back for 15 damn years, and now some janitor thinks I need help?" Harold happened to be replacing a light fixture in the hallway outside. Peter Ortiz, the security guard, stood nearby, pretending not to eavesdrop. Poorly. "He probably just wants attention," Peter muttered under his breath. "Always acting like he's better than everyone." Evelyn flung open the office door. "Mason!" Harold turned slowly. "You think I'm weak," she said. "You think writing up some nonsense in a notebook gives you the right to diagnose me?" "I never said you were weak," Harold replied calmly. "I said there are signs, and signs are warnings. You ignore them, they don't disappear. They escalate. You're not a doctor." "No," Harold said. "Not anymore." "Then stay in your place." She turned and slammed the door behind her. Peter chuckled, shaking his head. "Guess somebody forgot what a janitor's job is." Harold said nothing, but Lionel's words from the day before echoed in his mind. Skill doesn't stay in another life. It saves them. And now, that skill had just made him a target. The email came at 7:42 a.m., sharp. Subject, Administrative Review, effective immediately from HR Department to Harold Mason. No salutation, no context, just 6 cold words. Your access badge has been deactivated. Harold stood outside the building, the revolving doors spinning without him. The security scanner had blinked red when he swiped his ID. Peter Ortiz had shrugged from the other side of the glass and mouthed, "Sorry." Inside, the day moved on as if nothing had changed. Harold didn't turn around right away. He simply stood there, watching the people who barely ever noticed him walk through without a second thought. He was no longer invisible. He had become inconvenient. Meanwhile, on the 15th floor, Clara Donovan closed the blinds of her office and locked the door. Across from her, Dr. Lionel Hughes sat in a guest chair, flipping through Harold's notebook again. "He's right," Lionel said. "The patterns are consistent with early-stage neurological deterioration. Temporal lobe misfires, the tremors, the cognitive slips." Clara rubbed her forehead. "HR's spinning it as unauthorized employee conduct," said Harold. "Overstepped?" "Overstepped?" Lionel snorted. He may have overstepped into saving her damn life. They sat in silence. Then Clara leaned forward. "I can't push this publicly, not yet, but if we can document more, real time on record, I can go to the board." "We'll need eyes inside," Lionel said. Clara nodded. "Discreet ones." They began assembling a quiet network, employees loyal to neither Marcus nor Evelyn, just the truth. Lena, the lead receptionist, agreed without hesitation. She'd been the first to notice Evelyn forgetting names. Ty, from IT, said he'd track login times and system errors Evelyn triggered. things no one else would see. Even Sarah from legal, who kept her head down most days, confessed that Evelyn had signed 2 conflicting contract versions the week before. The network was small, quiet, watching, reporting. Meanwhile, Marcus Lee moved like a man already holding the throne. He began planting seeds at board lunches, casual hallway conversations, even during elevator rides. "Stress can really take a toll, you know," he'd say, shaking his head. "I worry about Evelyn sometimes. She's carrying too much." He never accused her outright. He didn't need to. The best lies were the ones dressed as concern, and behind the scenes he was building a succession plan. A memo appeared in the legal department titled Leadership Continuity Protocol Draft. No names, but everyone knew what it meant. Marcus started taking meetings Evelyn didn't know about, calling clients directly, even suggesting edits to company-wide emails before she reviewed them. To the untrained eye, it looked like support. To Clara, it looked like a coup. Outside the building, Harold sat on a bench across the street, watching the mirrored glass of the Silvercore Tower reflect the city's skyline. He wasn't waiting. He was thinking. His phone buzzed. A text from Clara. "We're moving forward. Quietly. I'll update you soon." Another text followed, this time from an unknown number. "Don't disappear. We're going to need you. L." He stared at it for a moment before slipping the phone back into his pocket. Harold hadn't lost his job. He'd been benched, temporarily, but benches had good views of the field. Inside, Evelyn stood in her private office, blinking hard as she stared at her laptop screen. The numbers swam again, columns that used to make instant sense now blurred together. She rubbed her temple, breathing slowly. The pressure behind her eyes had become a regular visitor. A knock at the door. "Come in," she said, straightening. Marcus entered, tablet in hand. "Just wanted to check on you. You seemed a little off yesterday." "I'm fine." Her voice was sharp. He hesitated, then offered a soft smile. "Of course. Just, people are noticing things. Small things." She narrowed her eyes. "What kind of things?" Marcus raised his hands. "Nothing serious. Just, some board members have asked me if everything's okay. That's all." Evelyn turned her chair away from him, facing the skyline. "Tell them I'm running this company just fine." "Of course," Marcus said smoothly. "I'll let them know." As he left, he didn't see her grip the edge of the desk, white-knuckled, or the small tremor returning in her left hand. But Lena did, from her desk near the glass, and she made a note. At 11:15 a.m., Clara received Lena's update. 10 minutes later, she emailed Lionel. Subject, confirmed. Visual disorientation again. Pattern holding. Lionel replied, "Let's keep going. We're getting close. But Marcus is moving faster than we thought." Back on the bench, Harold closed his notebook. The city buzzed around him, but his mind was focused, narrowed. They thought pushing him out would quiet him. They didn't know he'd spent years being silenced, and they had no idea how loud the truth could get when it finally found its voice. Jordan sat on the couch, phone in hand, brows furrowed as he watched the shaky footage play for the 3rd time. It had been recorded during a Silvercore board meeting, grainy, likely captured on someone's phone under the table. The angle was off, but the audio was clear. Evelyn Cross stood at the head of the conference room, her voice sharp at first. Then it shifted. She slurred a phrase, paused mid-sentence, and called a director by the wrong name. Laughter echoed awkwardly in the background. The video ended abruptly. Jordan turned the screen toward his father. "This is who you're risking everything for?" he asked, eyes narrowing. "You got suspended for trying to save a woman who doesn't even see you." Harold sat in his usual chair by the window, sipping tea, eyes distant. "She doesn't even respect you," Jordan continued. "And now you're locked out of the building, and for what? You think saving her is going to change anything?" Harold set the mug down slowly. The ceramic clicked softly against the wood. "It's not about her," he said. Jordan stood, pacing. "Then what the hell is it about?" Dignity? Honor? Because those things won't pay the rent. They won't pay my tuition either. Harold didn't flinch. I'm not asking you to understand. No, Jordan snapped. You're asking me to watch you disappear into some noble crusade while our lives fall apart. The silence between them stretched. I know you used to be more than this, Jordan finally said, quieter now. Mom used to talk about it, about the war, about the hospital. She said you were a miracle worker, a man people trusted with their lives. Harold's eyes flicked up. His face softened, but only slightly. Then, one day, you stopped, Jordan said, and you never told me why. Harold stared at him for a long beat. Then he looked away. Outside, the city lights blurred against the glass. The next morning, Harold met Lionel at a small coffee shop tucked beneath an old overpass. It was quiet, out of the way. The kind of place people went when they didn't want to be seen. You look like hell, Lionel said, sliding a mug across the table. Been a long week, Harold replied. Lionel opened his tablet, scanning the latest updates from Clara's network. Evelyn forgot the name of her own product line yesterday. Clara's spooked. Marcus is tightening the screws. Harold said nothing, just stirred his coffee slowly. Lionel leaned back. You need to tell your son. Harold didn't look up. He's angry because he thinks you gave up, Lionel continued. He doesn't know what you gave up. That matters. Harold finally set the spoon down. He doesn't need to carry my scars. That's not what this is, Lionel said. This is about showing him where you came from, what you stood for, why you're still standing. Harold exhaled, slow and steady. I saw what that kind of truth does to a kid, he said. It turns them hard. It makes them question everything. Or, Lionel countered, it makes them stronger. If you don't tell him your truth, someone else will hand him theirs, and that version won't be kind. Harold looked out the window. Let him find his own reason to stand tall, he said quietly. Not mine. Lionel studied him. That's the most honest thing you've said all week. Back at the apartment, Jordan sat alone at the kitchen table, textbooks, open but untouched. He stared at his notes, his mind clearly somewhere else. On the wall behind him, an old photo hung, Harold in uniform standing beside a younger version of Evelyn Cross. The photo was yellowing at the edges, its frame slightly crooked. Jordan didn't notice. His phone buzzed, a message from his student advisor. Deadline for deferral decision, Monday. He stared at the screen for a long time, then slowly turned it face down. Whatever choice he made, it would carry weight. Outside the window, the light was fading. The world, it seemed, was tilting quietly toward something uncertain, something irreversible. And for the first time in a long while, Jordan wasn't sure if he was running toward it or away from it. The Investors' Summit was held at Silvercore's top-floor ballroom, where glass walls gave the illusion of power stretching to the horizon. Evelyn Cross stood at the center of the stage, backlit by digital displays and company projections, a commanding silhouette in a fitted navy suit. She looked impeccable. She always did. But something was off. Marcus Lee stood just behind the curtain, arms crossed, eyes watchful. He had prepared the investor packet himself. Every word, every graph, every phrase, rehearsed and tightened. Silvercore, Evelyn began, has always been the standard bearer in healthcare tech. Our flagship platform, Cerebrax, has... She stopped. A pause. Then she blinked. Once. Twice. Cerebra. Link, she corrected. From the back row, Clara flinched. Cerebrax was the actual platform. Cerebralink had been an early prototype scrapped years ago. The slide behind Evelyn still read Cerebrax. Fourth quarter expansion plan. A quiet cough echoed. The room stiffened. Evelyn pushed on. This partnership with Westcore will open new doors for innovation. Marcus's head turned sharply. Westcore wasn't a partner. They were Silvercore's primary competitor. Gasps rippled. A young assistant named Danielle, seated near the back, subtly lowered her phone, which had been recording. She didn't mean harm. She just liked documenting events. But instinct told her this was more than a simple mistake. Marcus didn't move, didn't blink. He simply reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and texted a single word to his encrypted folder. Upload. An hour later, Clara sat at her desk, jaw clenched as she watched the footage. It had already been leaked. Someone, likely Marcus, had distributed it under the title, Crisis at the Core. Clips were spreading across private investor circles and internal staff chats. In the video, Evelyn looked lost. Her words slurred. Her smile faltered. This wasn't just a fluke. Clara slammed her laptop shut. She knew what this was. This wasn't concern. This was a takedown. Her phone rang. Lionel. "She's unraveling faster than we thought," he said. "No," Clara said firmly. "She's being pushed." Lionel paused. "You think Marcus—" "He's been grooming his moment for weeks," Clara said. "He's not documenting her decline. He's accelerating it. Every misspoken word, every slip-up, he's collecting like weapons." "He's trying to force the board's hand," Lionel said. "Make it seem like a mercy vote." "And it's working," Clara replied. That night she drove to a quiet parking structure behind a closed gym where Harold was mopping floors. He looked up as she approached. No words, just that patient, unreadable stare. Clara didn't waste time. "We're staging a succession meeting in 5 days," she said. "Marcus thinks it's to nominate him as interim CEO." Harold kept cleaning, slow and rhythmic. "But we're going to hijack it," she continued. "Turn it into an intervention, public, medical, evidence-based. Lionel will be there. So will the legal team. I've looped in 2 board members. If we do this right, we'll protect Evelyn and the company." Harold paused, glancing at his mop. "Do you trust me?" she asked. "I trust what's right," Harold said. Clara nodded. "Then we need you in the room." Harold didn't respond, but he didn't say no. She handed him a visitor badge. "We'll call it a floor inspection. You'll have full access." As Clara left, Harold stood alone in the corridor. He walked back to the janitor's closet, locked the door behind him, and opened the small drawer inside the metal shelf. There, nestled between cloth rags and bottles of bleach, was a small wooden box. He opened it. Inside, a silver pen, long and elegant. Not just any pen, his pen. The same one he'd clipped to his uniform in Afghanistan. The one that had signed medical orders, field reports, and, once, death notices. Captain H. Mason, M.D. He turned it in his fingers. It caught the light. For years he had avoided this moment, hidden behind routine, accepted invisibility as penance. But now the pen was clean, polished, ready. Harold placed it in his front pocket, deliberate, visible. This wasn't about glory. This was about standing up when no one else could, because sometimes the best way to save someone was to stop pretending you were no one. Marcus Lee stood at the head of the private boardroom, sleeves rolled just enough to project confidence without arrogance. His tone was measured, polished. He looked each board member in the eye as he spoke, voice calm, concerned even. "None of us want this," he said, "but Evelyn's condition is no longer isolated to moments. It's affecting leadership, operations, investor trust." He tapped the screen behind him. A slide appeared, bullet points from her last 3 missteps. Mislabeled products, confused strategy timelines, slurred speech, no attack, just facts. "We owe it to the company and to her legacy to ensure Silvercore survives. I'm proposing a vote to initiate temporary transition proceedings, just until we can determine long-term stability." The room was tense, not hostile, but uncertain. "Just a vote," Marcus added, to open the conversation, to prepare a structure. If her health rebounds, she resumes full control. But if it worsens, he trailed off, letting implication hang heavy. A few nodded. One cleared his throat. Another looked down at his tablet. Marcus smiled. The first crack of the door was all he needed. 2 floors below, in an empty supply closet near the back stairwell, Lionel clicked his tablet shut. He's moving fast. The vote's set for Friday. He thinks we're still on his side. Harold leaned against the metal shelf, arms crossed. We have one shot, Lionel continued. If Evelyn breaks down in the room, visibly, with witnesses, the legal team will have grounds for emergency medical action. It'll override the board vote. Harold's jaw tightened. That's a dangerous game. It's the only one we have, Lionel replied. Harold looked away. I never wanted it to come to this. I know, Lionel said, but if Marcus takes over, he'll gut Silvercore from the inside, turn it into a money machine. She built this place for something better. Harold didn't answer. Lionel placed a hand on his shoulder. You've seen this before, haven't you? Harold gave a slow nod. Afghanistan. Civilian contractor. Early-stage tumor. Thought it was migraines. Denial's a hell of a shield. Later that evening, Evelyn sat in her private office, the door locked, her face lit by the glow of her computer screen. She stared at her calendar, then at her phone, then back again. The numbers didn't match. She blinked rapidly, trying to steady herself. Her heart was pounding. She pulled open her drawer, searching for the small notepad she kept her handwritten schedule in, just in case. Gone. She reached for her phone to call Clara, but halfway through unlocking the screen, she forgot what she was doing. For the first time, panic rose like bile. Her hands trembled. She stood too quickly and nearly lost her balance. She grabbed the edge of the desk, steadying herself. No one had seen. But she had. And that was almost worse. The next morning, Harold arrived early. Not in uniform, not with his cart. He entered through the back freight elevator, flashed a visitor badge Clara had coded just for him. Inside his jacket pocket, the pen lay steady, cool against his chest. At the security desk, Peter Ortiz looked up and smirked. Back already? Harold didn't return the smile. Just passing through. Peter laughed. You janitors always get too attached to the shine. Harold walked past, calm, controlled, but his eyes were locked on the hallway ahead, where the real battle would soon begin. The parking structure was nearly empty, just concrete and shadows and the low hum of halogen lights that never quite stopped flickering. Harold stood still near the far wall, overlooking the city skyline through a narrow sliver of glass. The cold air didn't bother him. In his right hand, he held the pen, pressed tight between his fingers like a trigger. His breath was steady, but his mind was racing. Not with panic, with memory, with weight. Behind him, the elevator chimed. Peter Ortiz stepped out, carrying a half-eaten sandwich and a bottle of soda. He paused mid-chew when he spotted Harold. They locked eyes. You know, Peter said casually, stuffing the sandwich back into its wrapper, you don't have to do this whole brooding hero thing. No one's watching. Harold didn't answer. He just turned slightly, the pen catching a sliver of light. Peter's eyes followed the reflection, confused for a second, then wary. You okay, Mason? He asked. Still no response. Peter shrugged, trying to dismiss the discomfort creeping up his spine. Whatever. Just don't try to play savior, all right? These people don't change. Not for you, not for anyone. He turned, heading back toward the elevators, but not without a final glance over his shoulder. Harold never moved, but Peter walked a little faster. Across town, Marcus stood in his private study, mirror-facing. His custom-tailored suit was charcoal gray, his cufflinks subtle but sharp. The kind of look that said, I'm not replacing Evelyn Cross. I'm surpassing her. He held his speech in one hand, flipping through the first 2 pages silently. He knew it by heart, but it wasn't about memory anymore. It was about tone, precision, delivery. We must acknowledge when leadership is compromised, not as betrayal, but as duty. He paused, adjusted his lapel, and practiced the next line. This is not a power grab. This is protection. He smiled, the kind of smile meant for camera flashes and boardroom applause. Then he folded the speech neatly, slid it into his briefcase, and poured himself a drink. Tomorrow, he whispered, lifting the glass, we become inevitable. At that same moment, Harold walked slowly toward the outer edge of the rooftop level of the parking structure. He sat down on the low concrete wall, city lights flickering below him. He hadn't been this still in years. And then, footsteps. He turned. Jordan. Out of breath, backpack slung over one shoulder, a manila folder tucked under his arm. I figured you'd be up here, Jordan said, stepping closer. You always hated being underground. Harold blinked, surprised. How'd you find me? You're predictable, Jordan said with a half smile. Then he sobered. And stubborn. Like someone I know. He sat next to his father. They didn't speak for a moment. The silence was real, but it wasn't heavy. I saw the video, Jordan finally said, of that CEO, Evelyn. Harold exhaled, slow. You didn't tell me because you thought I'd walk away from med school. I didn't tell you, Harold said, voice even, because I needed you to choose your path without carrying mine. Jordan looked down at the manila folder. I applied for the accelerated scholarship program. It's a long shot, but I'll figure it out. Harold turned, brows raised. I'm not quitting, Jordan said, eyes sharp, because if you believe that woman's still worth saving, then I believe in you. For the first time in days, something in Harold's face broke, just slightly. A line at the corner of his mouth softened. He looked down at the pen in his hand, then back at his son. Your mother, Harold said quietly, always said you had more heart than either of us. Jordan smiled. She also said you were too humble for your own good. They sat in silence again. This time, it felt like a decision. A moment caught in amber. The calm before everything changed. As the city breathed below them, the pen glinted once more in Harold's hand. Tomorrow, the battle would come. But tonight, there was still space for belief. The meeting was held not in the familiar gloss of Silvercore's downtown conference room, but in Evelyn Cross's private estate, specifically the glass-walled sunroom overlooking her garden. A deliberate choice, meant to feel intimate, controlled. But the energy was anything but calm. Leather-bound chairs formed a half-moon around a long, custom wood table. The board was seated, murmurs filling the air like static. Coffee cups, digital tablets, phones silenced but still buzzing beneath palms. At the far corner of the room stood Harold. No janitor uniform this time, just a dark jacket, understated slacks. Still invisible to most. But not to Clara, who gave a barely perceptible nod. Not to Lionel, who kept glancing in his direction. And not to Marcus. Marcus Lee stood center stage, one hand on the back of Evelyn's empty chair, the other tucked neatly in his pocket. His tie was a deep navy, the knot sharp. He looked more like a CEO than the CEO herself. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, he began, voice smooth, rehearsed but not over-rehearsed. I know this is unorthodox, but the urgency of our situation calls for a candid and timely discussion. No one interrupted. Marcus turned toward the hallway just as footsteps echoed beyond the arch. Evelyn appeared. She wore cream slacks and a silk blouse, understated, professional, but not her usual armor. Her makeup was light, and for the first time in memory, her expression was unsure. She took one step, two, then faltered slightly. Harold saw it. So did Clara. So did Lionel. The others were too polite to stare. Her left hand, gripping a cane she hadn't used before, trembled. Her voice, when she spoke, was warm but halting. "Gentlemen, ladies, thank you for being here." She moved to her seat, Marcus quick to pull it out for her. She nodded once, grateful but wary. Marcus returned to his place, clearing his throat. "If I may begin," he said, eyes locking with Evelyn's for just a moment. Then he turned to the board. "We are here today out of respect for this company, for its legacy, and for its founder." He tapped the screen of the remote. Behind him, a screen illuminated with 3 slides, graphs, missteps, photos clipped from meetings. Harold recognized one. Evelyn looking dazed during the investor pitch. Another, the product launch where she announced the wrong dates. And then, the most recent one, from just days ago. Evelyn calling a supplier by the wrong name during a quarterly report. "These incidents," Marcus continued, "are not isolated. They indicate a pattern, one that could harm the future of Silvercore if left unaddressed." Evelyn's lips parted. She tried to speak. But the word got stuck. She cleared her throat. "I was tired. It's been a long quarter." Her voice was soft, unsure. Marcus nodded respectfully. "Of course, we all feel the weight, but leadership is measured not just in pressure, but in clarity." He walked slowly behind the board members, letting each sentence land. "We don't seek removal. We seek preservation. This vote is a formality, to ensure that contingency plans are in place should health or performance become unsustainable." He looked at Clara. "You, of all people, understand the risk of delay." Clara didn't respond. Her eyes flicked to Harold, then to Evelyn. Evelyn's fingers were trembling now, barely resting on the armrest. "I'm still capable," she said, trying to firm her tone. "I've led this company for 2 decades. You think a stumble or two—" Marcus stepped forward, cutting her off, but with measured grace. "No one questions your legacy, Evelyn. This is not betrayal. It's protection." His gaze lingered on her for a beat too long, and Harold saw it. Not pity, not concern, control. The trap was set, and Evelyn had walked straight into it. "I'm still capable." Evelyn's voice trembled as she pushed herself to her feet, eyes locking onto Marcus across the table. "You don't get to decide when I step down." Her left leg buckled. She steadied herself against the chair, breathing heavy. "I built this. You all—" She didn't finish. Her right hand clutched the table. Then came the tremor, violent, unmistakable. Her arm jerked back. Her knees gave out. A chair scraped backward as Evelyn collapsed to the floor. Her body convulsed, back arching as if pulled by an invisible string. Someone screamed. Coffee spilled. Lionel stood up so fast his chair tipped. Peter Ortiz, stationed quietly at the perimeter as part of the estate's security detail, froze. "Call 911, Clara shouted, but Harold was already moving. The mop bucket in the corner tipped as he shoved past it, dropping to his knees beside Evelyn with terrifying speed. His hands went to her head, turning it gently to the side. "She's seizing. Clear the airway." No hesitation, no questions. "Marcus, lift the chair. Out of the way." Marcus stood still, stunned. "Do it," Harold barked, eyes never leaving Evelyn. Lionel grabbed the chair himself, yanking it aside. Harold slipped off his jacket, cushioning it under Evelyn's head. Her convulsions slowed, then stopped. But she wasn't breathing right. "She's not posturing. Good. But I need— Peter!" Peter jolted as Harold called his name. "Turn her gently, left side, now." Peter moved, trembling. His eyes were wide, locked on Harold. Not the janitor, not the cleaner, the doctor. As he leaned down, a small metal object slid from Harold's shirt pocket, bouncing softly against the floor. Peter caught it mid-roll. A pen, worn from time, smooth with use. Captain H. Mason, M.D. Peter stared at the engraving as if it had just split the floor open beneath him. All this time, the man he had scoffed at, mocked, laughed off. He wasn't just someone. He was something. Someone who had once worn a uniform and saved lives under fire. And now, once again, he was saving a life while everyone else stood still. Harold was murmuring to Evelyn now, voice calm but firm. "You're safe. You're coming back. Just breathe through it. Don't fight it." The paramedics burst through the back entrance. Lionel had called them seconds after she dropped. They took over fast, but not without glancing at Harold, surprised at the stabilization already done. One of them nodded in respect. As Evelyn was lifted onto the stretcher, still unconscious but breathing steadier, the room began to shift. Clara wiped her face with the back of her hand. Lionel exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. And Peter stood in the corner, still holding the pen. He looked down at it one more time, then at Harold. Harold caught his gaze. Just for a second. No triumph. No, "I told you so." Just stillness, understanding. Peter tucked the pen gently into his jacket pocket, like it was a flag someone had dropped. Outside, the sirens faded into the distance. Inside, everything had changed. The ambulance's interior buzzed with quiet efficiency. The paramedic at Evelyn's side adjusted her IV drip while the other monitored vitals. A soft groan escaped Evelyn's lips. Her eyes fluttered open, pupils sluggish, blinking against the overhead fluorescent light. She turned her head, slow, disoriented, and the first face she saw wasn't Marcus's or Clara's. It was Harold's. He sat across from her, seatbelt strapped, posture straight, and in his hands was the pen. The same battered silver pen she had dismissed, ridiculed, overlooked, now resting in his palm like an artifact from a life she never asked about. For a second, she just stared at him, trying to place him in this new context. Not janitor, not nuisance, not threat, but the man who had saved her life. "You," she croaked, throat dry. Harold nodded once, calm. "You had a seizure. Your body gave you a warning before. Today, it shouted." She looked away, ashamed. But he leaned forward slightly. "You'll be okay, but you have to let go of being invincible." The words landed heavier than any business report ever had. At the ER entrance, a small group waited, Clara, Lionel, and Jordan. As they wheeled Evelyn in, Clara placed a hand on Harold's arm. "Wait, before they take her to surgery." She stepped forward and leaned over Evelyn. "I need you to see this." Clara handed over a crisp document. Evelyn squinted at it. At the top, Neurological Risk Assessment. Beneath it, Lionel Hughes's signature. It matched the one she'd seen on hundreds of internal memos. She looked up at him, confused. Lionel spoke gently. "Harold documented everything. Tracked your symptoms, patterns, the tremors, the speech breaks, the memory gaps. He saw it all, and he tried to warn you." Clara added, "We should have listened sooner." The weight of the truth settled into Evelyn's chest. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down the sides of her face, not just from fear, but from clarity. "I've been cruel," she whispered. "No," Harold said. "You've been scared, but it's not too late to start hearing people again." Before Evelyn could respond, shouting echoed from down the corridor. "Marcus." Two board members flanked him, stern-faced. "This is absurd. You're listening to him? He's a janitor. You're going to tear down decades of leadership over what, an episode?" "Enough," Clara snapped, holding up a tablet. "This video was taken during the investor meeting." She played the footage. Evelyn's confusion, her misnaming the product, her calling a rival firm their top collaborator. Then the audio cut to another clip, this time of Marcus, voice lowered, speaking to a junior associate. "If she slips just once more, the vote's mine. Don't interrupt her next time she blanks. Let it play." silence. Jordan's face stiffened. Lionel's expression darkened. Evelyn's eyes, full of betrayal, never left Marcus's. "You were waiting for me to collapse," she said. Marcus opened his mouth, but there was no recovery. Clara nodded toward the board members. "Effective immediately. Marcus Lee is suspended pending formal investigation." 2 security staff stepped forward, Peter Ortiz among them. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked at Harold and gave him a small nod. Not performative, just acknowledgement. As Evelyn was rushed into the operating room, Jordan stayed behind, standing next to Harold in the corridor. Through the small window, they could both see Evelyn being prepared for surgery. "Is she going to make it?" Jordan asked quietly. Harold didn't sugarcoat. "She has a fighting chance now. That's more than most people get." Jordan turned, watching the ER team work swiftly. "You really were a doctor." Harold didn't answer. Jordan stepped closer, voice lower. "You didn't say anything. Not to me. Not to anyone." "Why?" Harold finally turned to face his son. "Because being seen isn't the same as being heard, and sometimes it's not about what they call you, it's about what you do when it counts." Jordan looked at his father for a long moment. His eyes weren't full of anger anymore. They were full of pride. 6 months later, the Silver Corps headquarters looked the same. Marble floors gleamed, the glass elevator hummed, and the usual Monday morning shuffle played out like a well-rehearsed symphony. But the energy had shifted. The air held something it hadn't before: respect. As Harold Mason walked through the lobby, mop in hand, heads turned, not out of curiosity, but out of recognition. "Morning, Mr. Mason," a young executive said, holding the door open for him. "Sir," nodded a security guard, Peter Ortiz. The same man who once rolled his eyes now stood straighter, offering a crisp, respectful nod. Harold returned it with a slight smile. He didn't walk any faster than before. He didn't dress differently. The janitor's uniform still clung to his broad shoulders. But the way people looked at him had changed completely. He wasn't invisible anymore. Upstairs, the atrium had been redesigned. A new glass case stood beside the awards wall. Inside, an old janitor's broom, the wood still splintered from years of use. Next to it, mounted on velvet, was a silver medical pen engraved with Captain. H. Mason, M.D. Above it, a plaque read, "Sometimes the quietest hands save the loudest lives." In bold lettering beneath, the Mason Initiative. A scholarship fund for veterans and underrepresented youth entering the medical field. Inside the auditorium, the staff gathered for a quarterly meeting, this time not about profit margins or expansion plans. Evelyn Cross, standing at the podium, looked different. She had regained her strength. Her voice was steady, her presence dignified. She wore a soft navy suit and no heels, just comfortable shoes and a glimmer of humility in her eyes. "This company owes a great deal to many people," she began. "But today, we honor one in particular. A man who reminded us that dignity isn't worn, it's earned, that care doesn't always come from titles, but from courage, and that sometimes salvation comes wrapped in silence." She turned to Harold, who stood just off stage, uncertain. "Harold Mason, will you please join me?" The room erupted into applause. Not the polite kind, the real kind, the kind that shakes ceilings. As Harold stepped up, Evelyn handed him a plaque encased in glass. Silver Corps Valor in Service Award, his name engraved in gold. He didn't make a speech. He didn't need to. As he accepted it, the camera panned across the crowd. Clara, with tears in her eyes. Lionel with a knowing smile. Peter Ortiz, standing tall. And Jordan, front row, suit pressed, his stethoscope visible in his pocket, his eyes shining with pride. The applause kept going. Long, full, unapologetic. And in that, sound, something healed. Not just a company, not just a CEO, but the invisible spaces between people, the gaps where judgment used to sit, now filled with respect. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee? Or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, we hope you carry this story with you and remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.